Action.
It is always the case that I welcome any input from you. I'm not up here to give you information you don't have, but expect you to soak it up. I'm here to spark a discussion, and if that discussion occurs to you while I'm talking, please raise your hand and join in, because I will be only too happy to see that at work. So thank you, Jennifer, thank you, Jim, for the suggestion. I think it maybe can, I don't know, give some breath to the service. We'll see what happens. We are, as I said earlier, in a 5-week exploration of the 5 principles that we affirm each Sunday, that we just affirmed together a few moments ago. Now, it's important to remember, I think, that these are not advertising slogans. They're not gimmicks trying to get people's attention. Our collective goal is not to get more and more people into unity. Our collective goal is to expand and deepen collective consciousness. That's what brings us together. We do that here as completely and fully as they're doing in Unity in Houston right now, where they have hundreds of people. The number is not so important. The consciousness is what makes the difference. And so we're using these 5 principles to help us expand our own consciousness, knowing that as that happens, we are affecting the world, the collective consciousness, in really amazing ways. Occasionally, I'm going to be working a lot this morning because I was guided to it this week with a book you may be familiar with. And if not, I would highly recommend it. It's by Eckhart Tolle, and it's A New Earth. I hadn't read it for a while. I came across a quote of his this week, which sent me back to the book, which sent me into sitting and reading the whole thing again, because it's so true. Now, there are people in Unity that get kind of nervous when something becomes that popular. You know, nervous when it ends up on Oprah. You know, that's sort of the major test. But Charles and Myrtle Fillmore would never have, for a moment, have shut off any other source of inspiration, source of understanding. So it is silly for us to do that. In fact, Jesus wouldn't do it either. His disciples came to him at one point and said, you know, there's a guy in the next town who is using all your principles, he's telling all your jokes, and he's getting the crux, and he's not one of us, and he doesn't belong, so tell him, make him go away. And Jesus said very famously, those who are not against us are for us. You know, it doesn't really matter who gets the credit. If you're working on the same energy, if you're moving in the same direction, you're going to be fine. This week, using Eckhart Tolle, we're going to look at ourselves. We're on the 2nd principle. And I called the first one, God is God. This one is God as me, God as you, God as us. That's the essence of the 2nd principle. And that's what we're going to be looking at a bit today. Eckhart describes us as human with a small h, beings with a capital B. Human beings with a capital B. And where other works have focused on 2 voices, the voice of the ego and the voice of spirit, Eckhart Tolle seems to suggest 3 voices. And it's a very important difference, I think, in understanding how we are God. And we need to get over the discomfort of saying that. I feel uncomfortable saying it. We need to get over the discomfort of saying I am God. It doesn't mean I am the allness of God and you should bow down before me. But it means that I am one with the power, the energy that we call God. Tolle names the 3 voices, the voice of insanity, the voice of awakening, and the voice of being. And I find that so very helpful and intriguing. And I think it ties in with that podcast you were talking about, Jennifer. That reminded me of the same thing. The loudest voice, you'll not be surprised to hear, is the voice of insanity. The aspect of our consciousness that absolutely accepts and believes all the fear-based thoughts and beliefs we've accumulated through this lifetime and probably through many lifetimes before this. The voice for insanity knows what it knows. It knows because it's had input. Now, getting into the question of what it doesn't know and what therefore, if it hasn't seen, does it see, and so forth. That ties into the same issue. It projects the past into the future, which ensures that the future will be like the past. It isn't evil. Don't ever think of that voice of insanity within you. If you have it within you, maybe you're one of those who don't have that. I'd like to talk to you after the service. But don't ever call it evil. If by evil we mean deliberately trying to create negative energies, it believes itself passionately. I think we can only work with it if we understand that. It's like an overly strict parent saying, I'm doing this for your own good. It absolutely is convinced that it is right. And for people with neither religious nor spiritual awareness, this is the only voice that can be recognized. And this is the consciousness in which they live their lives. And there too, that's an important point to remember as we're dealing with other people in the world. They are, boy, it ties so much in with that podcast. We could just sit down and have a conversation about the two. They are living life from their perspective. They are listening to the voice they're listening to. They are listening to the voice of insanity and believing it to be the voice of truth, believing it to be the only voice there is. Clear? The second voice is the voice of awakening. It's the voice that recognizes another way of seeing things. This is the voice we work to strengthen and support as an antidote to the insanity of the first voice. In a sense, it wants to draw the future into the present, affirming in this moment the truth we are moving toward. And that can be very helpful, and it can be tricky, can't it? It can be dangerous to act as if things are more perfect than they are. That's as dangerous as acting as if everything is bad and never will change. The voice of awakening, in Course in Miracles terms, I think this is true, I think I would say this is true, is still a voice of the ego. It's still the ego working with the apparent realities and limitations of the human experience. This is the realm of fear-based obedience to God's law. Many people who would describe themselves as living moral and religious lives live in this dualistic dimension all their lives, chafing at the limitations perhaps from time to time, but hoping for a better experience in another dimension after the human part of us dies. I have been watching so much this week on Science Network and Discovery and History about Stephen Hawking and his understandings, which do not conform with ours. I mean, he came to believe that he had proven that there was no God. What he had proven actually, I think, is that there doesn't have to be a God. That's a very different thing than saying there isn't a God. And I'd be interested in knowing how he's feeling about that right at this moment. But so this is the realm of a lot of religious people. There's good and there's bad. There's good and there's bad, and I live within those limitations all my life. I do what's good, I don't do what's bad. I sometimes wish I could do what's bad, and that makes me angry. I sometimes do what's bad, and that makes me ashamed. But I live with those principles. And then the third voice is the quietness. And I've said before, I think if I could change anything About creation, I would like to strengthen the voice for being within me so it gets a little louder and doesn't so often get lost, drowned out by the voice of insanity. The voice of being doesn't judge, doesn't condemn, knows nothing about fear. It observes the human drama as it unfolds, not with any sense of investment in the drama, but as a constant flow of opportunities to make choices that will dissolve the dramas, dissolve the apparent duality, move us forward in our spiritual assignment. So it doesn't try to overcome anything. The voice for being is the truth of who we are, the very core, the very essence of who we are. And it doesn't try to make the rest wrong. Excuse me, I'm dripping here. Last week, as is so often the case, I had an opportunity to bring into my own life experience in a conscious way the principles and awareness that I work to share with you each Sunday. That's not my favorite thing about ministry, but it seems to be true for me. Whatever I'm going to talk about, I'm going to experience. So I have to be very careful what I'm going to talk about. To skip the story and cut to the chase, I fell on the ice is what happened. I fell on the ice. Which, hence the cane today, just for a little extra support. It hurt. It was a fall. It was definitely a fall. The positive of it is that since my hip replacement, which was what, 3 years ago, I think? 4, maybe 3. Somewhere in the back of my mind has been the fear of falling. What happens if I fall and the hip goes sprawling and I have to go back and have it put together again. So in a way, now I've fallen, and nothing happened to the hip, everything was fine, so I can go on with my life.
No more fear.
Well, less fear. Now the voice of insanity said, oh my God, we're dying. The voice of insanity said, whose fault is this? Who put that ice there? Who didn't remove it when they should have? Whose fault?
Why did I fall?
Why did I fall? Oh, the pain. Oh, the agony. Oh, poor me. The voice of awakening is beginning to use spiritual awareness to deal with challenges, but it's still, by and large, a voice for duality, and it can get very tricky, because it can get into, what did I do to deserve this? What did I do to bring this on myself? And that's that awakening awareness that there are extra dimensions to life, but it's still an ego sense that we have to control that. And the voice for being, which was very present while I was lying there on the sidewalk, said, well, this is interesting. Really, how can I use this experience? Not only to shape my talk on Sunday, but how can I use this experience to further the coming of the new consciousness? It didn't interfere with my life, it was an addition to my life, and there was that presence within me that was watching and saying, this is okay, this is interesting. I'm not going to project it into the future and say, oh, I'm always going to fall. I'm not going to pull from the past and say, this is just like what happened to me. This is the moment. And this is an interesting moment. Insane mind, awakening mind, beingness constitute, here we go again, a trinity of sorts. Now what is a trinity? It's a man-made, mind-made, artificial construct that attempts to explain the inexplicable, to define the undefinable. It has no real basis in spiritual truth. There are not, for example, a literal Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But it seems easier for us to grasp the eternal unity of spirit if we break it down into 3 distinct parts. Charles Fillmore did frequently, as mind, idea, and expression. And of course, we all grew up with Trinity, that whatever church we were in, there was some aspect of that divine Trinity, wasn't there? Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. That was,
Well, if you didn't grow up in a Christian church, you didn't.
well, if you grew up in a Christian church.
There's some people who didn't grow up in Christian churches.
Even,
We
yeah.
didn't have that so much in the Orthodox show I came from.
Well, that's another conversation, but it's
No,
certainly
no.
not totally absent from Judaism either. I mean, it's there.
Maybe it is in some
Yeah,
other dimension.
it's there.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a convenient way.
I meant it kindly, just like if
I
you said
understand.
something like that, it would be
I
like a
understand.
sacrilege. But
Buddhism is similar. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
That's true. Interesting.
There are,
yeah. Mother,
we could do this all morning, back and forth.
Like I said, if you
I think of them in
That's
a
right,
way, or I was thinking of them this week at least, in a way as ice, water, and steam. They're of the same essence at different levels of density. They're the same molecular structure, moving at different speeds. They're not separate things. And key point, it's not really difficult to move from one to the other. We tend to think, when we're back in our water state, we tend to think that steam is impossible to get to until we've worked through a whole lot of stuff. You can be steam anytime you choose. You can lighten yourself. You can lighten your burden, as it were, anytime you choose. Because body, mind, and spirit are all aspects of the same divine essence. Body is like ice, the densest expression of that energy. Mind is like water, less dense, less rigid, more fluid. And spirit is steam, the same essence expressing a pure, expansive possibility. They are not separate things, and we do not move from one to the other like traveling from one place to the other, or climbing up and down a flight of stairs.
what could you say what mind, idea, and expression means? I don't
Well,
understand it.
I'm tying this into the totally between insanity, awakening, and being.
Okay.
So think of it as insanity, awakening, and being. The awakening mind is where we spend a lot of our time, because we have the idea that we have to work to get to being, when in fact it's who we are and it's what we always are. We only have to relax into being, don't we? Our I am, which is the point of this, the me as God, you as God, is not one or the other of these three states. We don't become God when we move into being. Our I am, that which we truly are, is the energy that expresses as all three. As the insanity voice, as the awakening voice, and as being. Being needs and uses all that came before. All the awakening thoughts, all the insane thoughts. It's our creative consciousness then that makes the choices that cause this energy to express at one or another level of density. Well, okay, fine, but how will this help me pay my bills this week? Or lose 10 pounds, or meet the right and perfect person? Understanding the innate oneness makes everything possible. Let's say you want to lose weight. Not that anybody in this room needs to lose weight. It's just an example. Let's say you'd like to lose weight. You can't actually lose weight. Nobody can. I mean, it's there, right? You need to refine the intention. Sorry. What you really want to do is elevate the vibration of your unique energy so that some of what is now expressing as dense body is converted to mind activity or spiritual beingness. That's the challenge and that's the opportunity. We don't have to lose anything. We have to transform, and we have that ability within us. You can choose to become less dense. You can. And feel it happening. You can also go in the other direction and become more dense. This is what people mean when they want to get out of their heads with exercise or body focus. This is what Jennifer was doing with her meditation this morning, making us trees, taking us deep into the human experience, the insanity of believing separation, so that through that we can expand into awakening and into being. This is the ability to allow beingness of spirit to express at whatever density we choose. We can, and we should, bring beingness into our awakening, our insane mind, so that we can appreciate it more or release it more quickly. You know, there are times, and again, I refer back to the meditation, there are times when in this world, in this physical plane, it is a moment so precious that you want to, grok it, to use the science fiction term. You want to appreciate it, you want to be there for a while. You can lighten yourself into that moment and appreciate it from being and make it a deeper part of your consciousness, deeper part of your contribution to collective consciousness, and that gives that moment more power. At the same time, if you're having a challenging moment with your body in some way, you can lighten it. You can bring being into it. It won't make it go away, but it will change your perception of it. There are an infinite variety of choices that will shape and define our identity and our experiences. We'll talk more about that when we continue this series after Easter. Until then, be alert, be aware. Play with your personal power this week. See how it feels to become more densely human. Now, your insane ego will only want to do that when there's pain involved, or to make you even more of a victim. Make a different choice. Find moments of joy to experience more deeply by increasing your body density. And if you find yourself stuck in a loop of fear-based thoughts, don't judge, don't resist. Choose to increase your vibration level. Choose. So that the density of these thoughts can be easily dissolved in the expansive energy of your spirit. We now know who we truly are. It's time to learn how to be it. How to move easily and joyfully from body to mind to spirit and back again 1,000 times a day. It takes faith and it takes practice. That's what we're here for. And there's no time like the present.
Reverend Ed, can I share something?
Absolutely.
Are you familiar with The Course of Love, another channeled book of Jeshua's?
I'm not familiar with the Course of Love.
Okay, because he right at the beginning talks exactly about this. He says, so the ego in you has no interest in learning. The spirit has no need to learn. So who is it in you that is learning? And his answer is, it's the Christ in you. And through the whole book, what evolves is as you take care of the problems that come up lovingly, the Christ becomes stronger and stronger, so that you that becomes your identity, as opposed to thinking that you're the ego, so that you become the Christ who is in direct communication with God.
I think that's true and important. I wouldn't equate the Christ with being consciousness.
No, it's the
equate
awakening
Christ with the whole
consciousness.
thing, the awakening.
Well, I'm just saying that's the
beauty,
language
yeah.
that he uses in that book is to say that the Christ in you is the awakening, is the awakening consciousness.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a different use of the term than I'm used to, but it certainly works.
I encourage you to read that
I'll
book.
check
It's
it out,
pretty
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
A
Yeah, I
Course of
just
Love.
wanted to mention keeping a true Lent. Yesterday's was in miracles,
Yes.
and it seems like it's talking about that same idea of a miracle does not originate in personality, and it says renewing a severed relationship is a miracle. Yet the fact that our car won't start is also a miracle. So it's a very interesting page. If anybody wants to read it, then.
In my mind, the fact that my car will start is a miracle. My understanding of automotives is so limited that just every time I turn on the key, I think, gee, that's kind of a miracle. How amazing. Yeah.
I think the point that he was making, though, is that you're judging if you're saying that one thing that's positive is a miracle and not the negative thing. And I didn't mean you just judged, but it's really important to me that being part doesn't say health is good, sickness is bad.
No.
It says I am whatever I am. Yeah.
in this moment, this is what's
Yeah.
happening, and
Right.
it's interesting, you know, it's interesting. And we get into the difference between, very important difference between judgment and discernment. Judgment is, you know, a stumble on the path, that's always a danger. Discernment is just, I see from, as spirit, I see how this can work to my good or work to the good of the collective consciousness. I see possibilities in this that my ego mind, my voice of insanity is not seeing at all. It's over there in the corner screaming blood murder. But the miracle is, and the gift is, that I can see differently. Yeah? Yeah.
This week I was introduced to a new awakening tool, and it's ask and receive. It has 5 statements. And the first statement is that there's a part of my being that already knows how to fill in the blank. For me today, how to relax while I'm driving to Unity today. The second statement is that part of my being is willing to receive this information. The third statement, it is doing so in grace and in peace. Fourth statement, my mind, my body, mind, and spirit is receiving this information. And the fifth statement is the information transfer is complete.
I love that, and it's very interesting, especially the third statement. Could you repeat that again?
It is doing so in grace and in peace.
I happen to be writing an article for Unity magazine for I don't know, the summer issue or some future issue. I never keep track. On grace. They wanted me to write on grace. And while I was doing this work, part of me was also thinking about that work, which, you know, still awaits me. And I was thinking that grace is how we move from one voice to another voice. Grace is the gift of being able to recognize that I'm in the voice for insanity and I need to lift up to a higher level. I choose to. I don't need to. I choose to. And grace is the way we do that without turning it into dramas and confrontations. It's just the ability and knowing the ability and mastering the ability to move. I think that to me would be the Christ, is that, you know, Jesus was just able to gracefully be whatever he needed to be. Certainly he was a voice for, he was listening to his voice for insanity sometimes when he yelled at the Pharisees and called them hypocrites. He lost his temper very often, but he had the grace to move from one to the other and always to anchor himself in the beingness. That is very important, very powerful. Jennifer?
That's, first of all, thank you for that, because I come from an Eastern religion sort of perspective, and so to hear that definition of grace and apply it to my yoga nidra, where you are the experiencer, the one who observes, and then move into pure being, and to have that, so thank you for that, because that movement is like, I describe it as a gift. It's something that happens through me and not by my own. And then the other thing I wanted to add was in Hinduism, there's a concept of tamas, rajas, and sattvic. And that applies, it's 3 vibrations. It's another type of trinity. And like you were talking about the body, sort of the mind and the spirit, that's also a concept. They have a God trinity as well, which is more mutable. But that idea of things being at different vibrations, literally, and it can be found in food, is simple. It's often discussed in terms of the energy of what food you're eating. And so I wanted to mention that as well.
That's interesting because it reminds me of heart math. Some of you know that I've been a student of heart math for 20-some years now. And they don't pray before they eat. I would say they do say grace. But what we do is, elevate the vibration of the food we're about to eat, so that it serves us on different levels, on many different levels. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that ties
We
in.
talk about the intention of cooking in
Right.
that oftentimes, and the intention.
Cynthia's.
Right, exactly,
Yes.
literally, that you're infusing it when it's made with love
Love,
and
yes.
intention, that it literally tastes different
Yes.
than it does when it's made sort of in a
Or you're
rote
angry
way.
or-
Yeah.
You
Right.
are infusing it with energy.
Wow.
It's raised to a different vibration.
We have Dave to thank for that.
Yeah, he's good at that.
Yes.
There's an important distinction, which I just lost, between the intention, having a dark intention, and having a dark outcome. If it seems to me that anything you're doing because you have to do it, or you feel you have to do it, is going to be anchored to the voice of insanity, because you're doing it, but not as a freely chosen expression of yourself. You're doing it as an obligation that's been imposed upon you from outside.
Job.
Yeah,
But-
Chandra.
What about when you have a sense that it's not so much that you have to because you're gonna be a bad person if you don't, but that it's more something you have to do to move yourself forward. And I can, give an example. I was at a workshop last weekend, thank you, that was very significant, and I knew that I had to go, and I was sick. I felt physically sick, and I was like, I don't care, I'm going anyway. And I actually got sick in the car, but I didn't let it stop me. There was a sense that this was something that, in a sense, that I must do, but it wasn't externally imposed. It was more that it was necessary for my spiritual growth to push
And the importance there is that it's not necessarily anything you're going to learn in the workshop.
Right.
You may be guided there because you're going to connect with somebody else sitting in the
Right.
audience. We don't know necessarily what the gift is. Being knows, and when we bring being into it, then we will come upon the gift. And it may be what is being said in the workshop. It may be someone you meet in the workshop. It may be 1,000 other things. But yes, it's that instinct that I have to go, not because I'm lacking anything, but because I
wasn't
want to be
lacking.
there and be part of that energy. I
Because
just
it
feel
was like I
called
was
to
being
that energy.
impelled, like, do it, no, but it's not like, oh, I have to go see
Yeah.
my mother,
Right.
otherwise she won't like me or something.
Right. Okay, well, this is, I think, going on a bit longer than we had really intended, but I love working this way. I hope you do.
Yeah, no, I think it's
And I hope you'll
great.
feed back to the board, because they're evaluating all of this and trying to decide how the service should unfold. So remember this week to be conscious of which voice, and to realize your absolute ability gracefully to move from one